9:47 on a Friday night. That is the exact minute the room went quiet. Not because a gun came out. Not because anyone screamed. It went quiet because a woman in a plain navy dress walked straight past Rocco Vitale, the most feared man in New York, without turning her head even once. His men braced for the order that always came next. Punishment. A name to remember. A warning was sent somewhere. Instead, Rocco said 4 words that made every guard in the room stop breathing. Get her home safe. Nobody in that ballroom had ever heard him give an order like that before. Not for a stranger. Not for anyone. Nora Callahan had not planned on being at that gala at all. She was 31, a textile conservator who spent most of her days in a quiet workshop on the Upper West Side, hunched over antique fabric under a magnifying lamp, repairing threads that were older than the country itself. She was not rich. She was not polished in the way the women at that party were polished. She was plus size, comfortable in her own skin in a way she had fought hard to get to, with reading glasses pushed up into curly auburn hair and hands permanently smelling of linen thread and beeswax. She had only come because her mentor, an elderly appraiser named Estelle, had begged off sick and asked Nora to represent their firm at the unveiling of a private tapestry collection. Nora had agreed because Estelle had done more for her career than anyone alive. Not because she wanted to spend her evenings surrounded by people who traded in old money and older secrets. She did not know who Rocco Vitale was when she walked past him. She genuinely did not recognize the name whispered behind hands as she crossed the ballroom floor, focused entirely on finding the table where the tapestry pieces were laid out for inspection. She had a job to do. She did not have time to notice a tall man in a dark suit watching her with an intensity that made his own men shift uncomfortably. She simply walked past him, close enough that her sleeve nearly brushed his arm, and kept walking. Rocco Vitale had spent 15 years building an empire out of shipping routes, warehouses, and men who owed him their lives. Women crossed rooms for him. Men lowered their eyes. Nobody walked past him like he was furniture. He watched her go, jaw tight, something unfamiliar sparking behind his dark eyes. His second in command, a broad, quiet man named Sal who had worked security beside him for over a decade, leaned in close enough to speak without being overheard. "Boss, you want me to find out who that is?" "I already know who she is," Rocco said, not looking away from the retreating navy dress. "Estelle Marsh's conservator." "Callahan." Sal blinked. "You had her vetted before tonight." "I had the whole guest list vetted before tonight." Rocco's voice was flat, unreadable. "I did not expect to care about one name on it." Sal said nothing else. In 15 years, he had never once heard his boss admit to caring about anything that was not business, blood, or both. He filed the moment away carefully, the way a man learns to notice the first crack in a wall long before it becomes a real problem. Across the room, Nora had no idea any of that had happened. She was already elbow deep in her work, oblivious to the fact that she had just become the single most interesting thing in a room full of powerful, dangerous people. She found the tapestries exactly where the invitation said they would be. 3 long tables at the back of the ballroom, guarded discreetly by 2 men in black who did not so much as glance at the wine being poured a few feet away. The centerpiece was a 17th century wall hanging, faded gold and deep crimson, depicting a harbor scene. Nora pulled on her gloves without thinking twice, the noise of the party fading into background static the way it always did once real work was in front of her. "You are not drinking champagne," a low voice said behind her. She did not turn around right away. "I am working. Everyone here is working. Most of them just do not admit it." She finally looked up, and the sight of him nearly made her drop the loop in her hand. He was taller up close than he had looked across the room, dressed in charcoal. His expression unreadable in a way that should have unsettled her and somehow did not. "You are Mr. Vitale," she said, placing the pieces together. "This is your collection." "It is. Then you should know your header thread is fraying along the top seam. Whoever stored this before you did not control the humidity properly." She turned back to the tapestry, entirely unbothered by who he was. "It needs work before it needs an audience." Something shifted in his face, the same flicker she had caused when she walked past him minutes earlier. No offense. Something closer to fascination. You are the conservator Estelle Marsh sent. I am. She told me you were the best in the city and that you would not care who I was. He almost smiled. I did not believe the second part. Believe it, Nora said, already threading a fine needle through the edge of the fabric to test its give. I care about the weave, Mr. Vitale, not the wallet holding it. For the rest of the evening, he stayed near the table, arms crossed, watching her work with the same stillness he probably used to watch a business deal fall apart. She noticed him. Of course she noticed him. But she kept her hands steady and her questions professional. And if her pulse climbed every time his voice dropped low near her ear, she told herself it was simply the wine she had not drunk. Over the following weeks, the tapestry restoration became a legitimate, ordinary arrangement. Nora came to his Tribeca townhouse 3 mornings a week, set up in a sunlit study on the 2nd floor, and worked in comfortable silence while Rocco moved in and out of the house handling calls she was never meant to hear. He started staying in the room longer than his business required. He learned, without asking, that she took her coffee with too much cream and not enough sugar. He learned she hummed old jazz standards when a repair was going well and went completely silent when it was not. He learned the exact careful way she handled 200-year-old silk, like it might still remember being handled roughly once a long time ago. You talk to it, he said one morning, watching her murmur softly to a torn corner of gold thread. It is a superstition, she admitted, cheeks warming. My grandmother did restoration work too. She always said fabric holds memory. You have to be gentle with it or it fights you. Does it fight you often? Only the pieces that were hurt badly before I got to them. She glanced up at him, something knowing in her eyes. Fabric is not so different from people that way. He did not answer that. He just watched her a moment longer than the silence needed, and something quiet and dangerous settled into place between them. Sal noticed the change before anyone else in the house did. He had worked for Rocco long enough to know the rhythm of the man's days down to the minute. And lately that rhythm had shifted entirely around a woman who showed up 3 mornings a week with a leather tool roll and old jazz humming under her breath. You are smiling at the security footage, Sal said one afternoon, catching Rocco reviewing the study cameras longer than any actual threat required. I am checking the perimeter. You are checking her. Sal did not bother hiding his amusement. Boss, in 10 years I have never seen you slow down for anything. Not once. Rocco did not answer, but he did not argue either, which told Sal everything he needed to know. Nora, for her part, found herself looking forward to those mornings more than she wanted to admit. She started arriving a few minutes early, just to have an extra moment in the quiet study before Rocco's schedule pulled him away. She started noticing things about him too. The way his shoulders dropped half an inch when he stepped into that room, like it was the only place in his life where he did not have to hold himself like a weapon. You are different here, she told him one gray Tuesday morning, not looking up from her needle. Different how? Quieter. Like you are allowed to just be a person for an hour. He considered that for a long moment, standing near the window with his hands in his pockets. Maybe I am. This room does not ask anything of me. Neither do you. I ask you plenty of questions. Not the kind that cost anything. He finally looked at her, something unguarded in his expression. Everyone else in my life wants something from me. You just want good lighting and steady hands. She laughed at that, soft and genuine, and the sound seemed to land somewhere in his chest he had not expected it to reach. The trouble started with a name Nora did not recognize on a scrap of parchment sewn into the tapestry's lining. She found it during the 4th week, carefully unpicking a reinforced patch along the border, and beneath it was a folded slip of aged paper covered in tight, cramped handwriting and a string of numbers that meant nothing to her. She brought it straight to Rocco without a second thought, the way she would bring anything unusual she found in her work. His reaction told her immediately this was not nothing. His face went very still. Where exactly was this? Sewn into the border under the reinforcement patch. Rocco, what is it? He did not answer right away, turning the paper over twice in his hands like he was deciding how much to say. My grandfather hid ledgers in strange places his whole life. This looks like one of his codes. He looked up at her, something guarded entering his voice for the first time since she had met him. There are people who would have paid a great deal to make sure this tapestry never got restored carefully enough to find it. What people? The Kestrel crew, he said quietly. They have been circling this collection since before I bought it. If they knew what was sewn into the lining, they would have torn the whole thing apart with their hands instead of hiring someone who actually knows how to look. Nora felt the floor tilt slightly under her. You think I am in danger because I found a piece of paper. I think you are in danger because you are the only person who can read the rest of it, he said, and for the first time real fear moved behind his composure. I need you to let me put security on you. Not because I own you, because I would rather have you angry with me than in a hospital bed. She wanted to argue. Every independent bone in her body wanted to tell him she did not need protecting, that she had built her whole career on trusting her own hands and no one else's. But something in the rawness of his voice stopped her. Fine, she said quietly, but I keep working. I am not hiding in a panic room while you handle this without me. He studied her for a long moment, something like respect settling into the tension in his jaw. I would not have expected you to agree to hide anyway. 2 days later, a man followed her from her apartment to the subway station, close enough that she noticed him twice on the same platform. She did not panic. She memorized his jacket, his gait, the scar along his left eyebrow, and reported every detail to Rocco's head of security the moment she reached the townhouse. That night, Rocco found her in the study, hands still slightly unsteady from the walk over, and instead of a lecture, he simply sat beside her in silence until her breathing slowed. You did not run, he said eventually. I got a good look at him instead. Seemed more useful. He let out a low, surprised laugh, the first real one she had heard from him. You are the strangest woman I have ever met, Nora Callahan. Careful, she said. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was entirely a compliment. From that night on, Sal quietly assigned 2 of his most trusted men to watch her building without ever telling her their names or making their presence obvious. Nora noticed anyway, the way she noticed everything, and instead of resenting it, she started leaving coffee out for whoever was on the early shift. A small kindness that left both guards slightly baffled and thoroughly charmed. She is feeding my men, Rocco said one morning, half amused, half exasperated, watching the security feed. She does that, Sal said. Feeds strays, fixes broken things. It is sort of her whole personality, boss. Rocco did not answer, but something in his chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with danger at all. The following week, Estelle called Nora with news that made her sit down hard on the edge of her workbench. A second buyer, unconnected to Rocco, had approached the auction house asking pointed questions about the tapestry collection's provenance. Specifically, whether any hidden documents had been recovered during restoration. Estelle, sharp even from her sickbed, had given nothing away, but the questions themselves were enough to confirm what Rocco already feared. Word about the ledger had reached further than the Kestrel crew's inner circle. They are testing the waters, Rocco said grimly, pacing the study that evening. Seeing who talks, seeing who is careless. I have not told anyone, Nora said. I know, that is not what worries me. He stopped pacing, looking at her directly. It means they are getting desperate enough to ask questions in the open. Desperate men make mistakes, but they also make messes. I do not want you anywhere near the mess. I am already near it, Rocco. I found the paper. There is no version of this where I get to stand safely outside of it. He did not have an answer for that because she was right and they both knew it. The Kestrel crew made their real move at a private auction 3 weeks later, in a gallery on the east side where the remaining pieces of the tapestry collection were being formally presented to potential buyers before the final restoration was complete. Nora had not wanted to attend. Rocco had insisted, arguing that pulling her from the event would look more suspicious than letting her finish the job publicly, under heavy but invisible security. She had agreed, though every instinct in her told her something was wrong the moment she stepped through the gallery doors. She spotted the man from the subway platform within 10 minutes, standing near the back exit in a suit that did not quite fit him right. She did not tell Rocco immediately. She watched him instead, The way she had learned to watch a damaged seam before deciding how to approach it, looking for the pattern instead of panicking at the first loose thread. He kept glancing toward the tapestry displayed under glass at the center of the room, not at the guests, not at the champagne, at the fabric itself. That was when she understood. They were not there for her. They were there for the piece she had not finished restoring yet, the one still holding whatever remained of the coded message sewn deeper into its lining. She crossed the room fast, found Rocco mid-conversation with a buyer, and pulled him aside with a grip firmer than either of them expected from her. "They are not after me," she said quietly. "They are after the second panel. The one I have not opened yet. It is still in the crate in the back room." His expression sharpened instantly into something lethal and focused. "How do you know?" "Because I know how people look at fabric when they think there is something valuable hidden in it. That man by the exit has not looked away from the display case in 10 minutes. Rocco did not hesitate. He signaled two of his men with a small motion of his hand, and within seconds the gallery's calm surface cracked wide open. The man near the exit bolted for the back room the instant he realized he had been made. Two more men emerging from the crowd to follow him, weapons hidden beneath expensive jackets. Nora did not wait to be told to stay back. She moved toward the crate herself, faster than anyone expected a woman in heels to move, because she was the only one in that building who actually knew which panel held the message and which threads would need to survive whatever happened next. Her mind was racing through the layout of the crate even as her feet carried her. The exact placement of the tissue padding, the fragile spots along the border that could not take rough handling without tearing beyond repair. If the Kestrel crew got their hands on that panel and tore it apart carelessly looking for what was sewn inside, they might destroy the very thing they were trying to steal, and Rocco would lose both the message and the only proof of what his grandfather had actually hidden all those years ago. She reached the back hallway just as Sal shouted a warning from somewhere behind her, his voice sharp with alarm at seeing her break away from the group. "Nora, get back here." She did not stop. Some steady, stubborn part of her had already decided that if anyone was going to protect that panel properly, it needed to be the one person in the building who actually understood what she was protecting. The back room exploded into chaos within seconds of her reaching it. Gunfire cracked through the narrow hallway, splintering the doorframe just above her head as she dropped low behind a shipping crate, heart slamming against her ribs. Rocco was already moving, weapon drawn, positioning his body between the threat and the room where she crouched. "Stay down," he shouted, firing twice toward the man who had bolted, catching him in the shoulder and sending him sprawling into a rack of framed paintings. A second attacker rounded the corner fast, and Nora, still crouched by the crate, saw exactly what he was reaching for. Not a weapon aimed at Rocco, but a crowbar aimed at the crate itself, ready to tear the panel out and disappear with it in the confusion. She did not think. She grabbed the nearest thing within reach, a heavy iron easel stand meant for displaying paintings, and swung it hard into the back of his knees. He went down fast, cursing, and Rocco finished the fight a second later, disarming him completely before he could recover. Silence rushed back into the room, broken only by ragged breathing and the distant wail of approaching sirens. Rocco turned to her immediately, hands running over her arms and shoulders, checking for injuries with a franticness she had never seen from him. "Are you hit?" "Nora, look at me. I am fine," she said, though her hands were shaking hard now that the adrenaline was draining out of her. "I am okay." He pulled her against his chest without another word, and for a long moment neither of them said anything at all, just the sound of two hearts slowing down together in the wreckage of the back room. "You should have stayed in the gallery," he said finally, voice rough. "You would have lost the panel if I had. I knew what he was reaching for. You did not." He pulled back enough to look at her, something fierce and stunned moving across his face. "You just took down an armed man with an easel stand. It was the closest heavy object," she said, and despite everything, a small laugh escaped her. "I work with my hands for a living, Rocco. I know how to hit something hard enough to matter." The Kestrel crew's failed attempt to steal the panel, in front of half of Manhattan's private collectors, became the kind of story that spread through the underworld within a single night. An operation that clumsy, that public, that thoroughly beaten by a conservator with an easel stand instead of a gun, did more damage to their reputation than any retaliation Rocco could have ordered. Within 2 weeks, what remained of the Kestrel leadership had quietly scattered, unwilling to be associated with a failure that was humiliating. The final panel, once properly opened under careful, controlled conditions, revealed nothing more dangerous than an old ledger of debts long since settled and a list of names belonging to men who had died of old age decades ago. Rocco's grandfather, it turned out, had simply been a careful man who never trusted banks the way he trusted needle and thread. All of that, Nora said, staring at the yellowed paper spread across the study table. For a list that does not even matter anymore. It mattered enough to nearly get you killed. Rocco said quietly, standing behind her chair. That matters to me more than what is written on the page. She turned to look up at him, and the careful distance they had both maintained for weeks finally, quietly, gave way. You never once tried to make me smaller, she said. Not once. Not my job, not my body, not the way I insisted on staying in that gallery instead of hiding. Why would I want you smaller? He said simply. You are the only person who has ever made me feel like the empire was not the most important thing in my life. He reached into his jacket and set something small on the table beside the ledger. Not a ring yet, just a single spool of antique gold thread. The exact shade she had spent weeks matching for the tapestry's final repair. I had it made specially, he said, for the last seam. I wanted you to be the one to finish it. She picked up the spool, turning it over in her fingers, understanding exactly what he was really asking. Not just to close the tapestry, to close the distance between them for good. I will finish the seam, she said softly, but I am not doing it alone anymore. He smiled, real and unguarded, in a way none of his men had ever seen from him. Neither am I. In the weeks that followed, Nora finished the last panel exactly the way she had promised, gold thread catching the light under her steady hands while Rocco sat nearby, no longer pretending his presence in that room was about business at all. Sal took to leaving them alone without being asked, closing the study door with a small, knowing smile. Rocco pretended not to notice. Estelle, when she finally heard the full story from her hospital bed, where a stubborn flu had kept her the whole month, laughed so hard she nearly dislodged her own foreline. I sent you to represent the firm at one gala, she said, and you came back engaged to a man who owns half the docks in this city. I came back because I found a scrap of paper in a seam. Nora corrected, smiling despite herself. Everything else just happened around that. Everything worth having usually does, Estelle said, and squeezed her hand. They were married the following autumn in a small ceremony at Estelle's old workshop, surrounded by half-finished tapestries and the smell of beeswax and thread. Exactly the kind of quiet, unglamorous room Nora had always felt most like herself in. Rocco stood at the front in a plain gray suit instead of his usual armor of black, watching her walk toward him without once looking away, the way she had never once looked away from anything that mattered. Sal stood near the back, arms crossed, wearing an expression closer to pride than anyone had ever seen on him. When Rocco caught his eye across the room, Sal simply nodded once, like a man watching a decade-long theory finally prove itself true. These days, the finished tapestry hangs in the front hall of their home, gold thread catching the morning light exactly where Nora repaired it with her own hands. Rocco still stops in front of it some mornings, just to look, remembering the night a woman walked straight past him without a glance and somehow ended up rewriting the rest of his life. If the story reminded you that real strength does not have to shrink itself for anyone, tell us in the comments. Tell us about the moment someone finally saw you exactly as you are. And if you loved watching Nora hold her ground against the most dangerous man in New York, stay close. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us bring you the next story, because the best ones are always waiting just around the corner.